In this video, I'm gonna be talking about the Powerless Trilogy plus Powerful. I will be giving my non-spoiler review of the whole trilogy. What is it about? What are the different topics and tropes that are covered throughout the book? What can you expect? What are the plots and subplots? What about the novella, Powerful? Do you need to read it? Is it worth it? Is it relevant to the trilogy? Who and what is it about? And when should you read it? And I will also give you my honest opinion and impressions on the whole trilogy. This is a non-spoiler review, so if you haven't read any of these books, this will be a safe space for you. But if you have already read this trilogy and you're just here because you wanna see what other people are thinking about it, I will tell you that I have also made a video that covers all my theories on what's coming next in this series, in the universe of Powerless. And it's available on my channel, so make sure to check it out. But only if you have already finished Fearless. Let's start with Powerless, shall we? What is this book about? Why is there so much hype around this book? Well, let me take you to Ilia. Ilia is a kingdom that's ruled by a ruthless, power-thirsty king. This kingdom is unlike any of the other places in this world, because a few decades ago, the citizens of Ilia were affected by a plague that was vicious and cost the lives of many. But those lucky enough to survive the plague and everything that the plague put them through were gifted with abilities, with powers, thus gifting Ilia, a kingdom that had previously been rather weak, with an elite society. However, not all of those who survived the plague were gifted with abilities. There was a part of the population that remained as it was, ordinary. As the years progressed, the elites of Ilia and the ordinaries lived in a rather peaceful state. However, there was a mysterious illness that the ordinaries carried that seemed to weaken the elite's powers. And the king, being as power-thirsty as he was, unwilling to tolerate his elite society weakening, gave the ordinary population of Ilia the chance to leave the kingdom or perish within it. Most ordinaries fled through the unforgiving scourges. So the mercy that the king extended to the ordinaries was a death sentence of its own. But the king's mercy only extended to one day, because after that, every ordinary that would be found in Ilia would be sentenced to death. And thus, the purging began, ridding Ilia of its powerless ordinaries. That takes us to present-day Ilia, where Peyton Gray, our female protagonist, lives a rather challenging life in the slums of Ilia, amongst the lower class of the elites. That is, those elites that have powers or abilities that are not strong enough. Even from a young age, Peyton Gray has had to fight for survival and is a very resilient character. She lives on the streets with her close friend, Adina. And together, they make a living, they make it work, they are each other's homes. They are all they've got. However, Peyton carries a secret. She is an ordinary. She possesses no powers, but in order to survive in this society, even amongst the lesser of the elites, she poses as a psychic, an ability that nobody really knows about, but she plays her role rather well, and people believe her. One day, Peyton comes across an unsuspecting man, a stranger in the streets of Ilia. And after their short encounter, she finds herself saving him from possibly death. And this is a decision that Peyton will later regret, because that stranger is Prince Kai, one of the king's two sons, the most powerful elite of the whole kingdom, and also the future enforcer of Ilia. And he has quite a reputation, because he's the one who doles out the king's punishments. He's the one who persecutes the ordinaries that are still hiding within Ilia, kills them, and vanishes whoever sympathizes with them into the unforgiving scourges, thus sentencing them to death as well. Kai has his methods for finding out who the ordinaries are, but Peyton plays her role well. But this is not all. The purging trials are approaching. These trials are meant to showcase the most powerful of the elites, but they also include representatives from the people. that is, from the lower classes of the elites. And although these trials are not completely deadly, meaning that not only one person has to survive in order to win, these trials are still rather ruthless and people do perish during the trials. And in trials where power and ability mean everything, those representatives from the lesser elites have very few chances of surviving. Because of Payden unknowingly saving the prince, she has become quite the talk of the slums, and they nominate her as their representative to go to the purging trials. Now, Payden finds himself powerless and ordinary, not just hiding in the slums behind this fake identity, but actually playing the role of a lifetime in front of the whole kingdom of Ilia, while also fighting for survival. Now, this is the main plot of this book. And as the story progresses, we find out a lot more about Kai, about Ilia, about the kingdom, about the elites, and about Payden. And this story has a dual point of view, first-person narration, which means that some of the chapters from the beginning of the book will be narrated by Payden, and some other chapters will be narrated by Kai. There's quite a 50-50 balance, I would say, for the amount of chapters narrated by Payden versus Kai. So it's really cool to get the story told by both perspectives. And we have several situations in which a chapter is narrated twice, but from each of their perspectives, so I think that's rather cool. This book for me had everything. This was a 5-star book for me. It had deadly trials, secrets, hidden identities, deception, betrayal, and the best romance, or one of the best romances that I have read up to this date in the genre of romantic fantasy. When I tell you that the romance in this book was immaculate, the banter between the two main characters, Kai and Payden, the slow burn, the conflicting emotions, each of their background stories, how their relationship developed throughout this story, it was just beautiful. It was immaculate. It was perfection for me. The way Kai narrates his own chapters, the way he thinks, the way he speaks, he is pure poetry. I have so many sentences, so many paragraphs throughout the trilogy highlighted that are just Kai's poetic words, and I can prove it to you. And let me tell you that Kai Azer is my #1 male protagonist in romantic fantasy. Sharing #1 spot with Xaden Ryerson, I just can't bring myself to choose between the two of them, but he shares #1 spot, deservingly so. The way this book ends, you won't be able to wait for too long before picking Reckless, which is book #2. And that takes us to Reckless, which is a book that deals with all the consequences, all the findings, all the emotional damage of the first book. A lot of people say that Reckless is not as strong in terms of plot compared to Powerless. And the first time I read it, I agreed a little bit. I personally think that this is more of a character-driven book. There's a lot of conflicting emotions. There's a lot of dealing with emotions based off the aftermath of everything that happened on the first book. And it's a beautiful experience to witness the good, the bad, and the ugly of all the emotional turmoil of all the characters involved. And this book has also something special compared to the first one, which is that it switches to multi-point of view. So we not only find chapters narrated by Kai and Payden, but there's a little something else. A new perspective might be introduced. And although this book is quite character-driven, it still has a plot. It's just different from the first book in the way that in the first book you have a very clear understanding of everything that will happen in the book. You know that there's these trials. You know that there's X amount of steps to reach the end of the book. You know the type of secrets and information that have to be revealed, hopefully by the time that you reach the end of Powerless. But with this book, you are left with the aftermath of Powerless, and you know that something will have to happen, but you just don't know how it will play out. You are just reading this book and you don't know how any of the characters will react, what things will happen in the middle, so you're just floating around and seeing where it takes you. but it serves as the perfect bridge between book 1 and book 3. The romance and the angst and the tension and the bickering and the banter are still extremely strong in this and throughout the trilogy. It just never stops. And the way that this book ends, the cliffhanger at the end of this book, you won't be able to stop yourself from reaching out for book number 3. Which takes me to Fearless. Now, if you haven't read this series and you're watching this video in the hopes of finding out whether this trilogy is for you or not, you are lucky that the whole trilogy has already been published. Because when I finished Reckless, I was left with that huge cliffhanger and months, I believe about 7 months, of speculating, of theorizing over everything that might happen in this book. And still, when I read this, I just didn't see a lot of the things coming. Nothing could have prepared me for the last 100 pages of this book. This book was an emotional ride. This book was an emotional roller coaster. It started strong right after the cliffhanger of book number 2. And by the time I finished this book, I was left feeling happy because it was an epic, great conclusion to the whole trilogy, and that made me so happy. But it also left me feeling devastated and sad because of a lot of things that happened, and because this represented the end of the trilogy and the end of Peyton and Kai's story. I won't say anything about it. You have to experience it for yourself, but just be prepared to feel everything at once. But it's so much worth it. All the emotional damage, it's so worth it. And that's all I'm gonna say. In terms of plot and pacing, I believe that this book is a lot closer to the first book. You know where the story is going and what's needed to be done to reach the end. And I think that when you read the books of this trilogy back to back, they fit together really nicely. The second book just fits perfectly right there in the middle. The way that the pacing of the trilogy as a whole just worked beautifully together, it was just so much more evident. I'm not objective, I know, but I just love this series. For me, this is a 5-star series, and I would recommend it to anyone. Now let's talk about Powerful. So you've seen this novella and you wonder, is this relevant to the series? Should I buy it? Should I read it? When should I read it? Well, the short answer is yes, you must read it. This is an absolute must. I didn't read it the first time. I read Powerless and I was unaware that this novel was so relevant to the story. I bought this novella at the same time as Powerless, but I thought it's one of those novellas that narrates a story of a side character. I will read it after Powerless. Wrong. Mistake. Huge mistake. Let me tell you why, without spoilers, of course. This novella narrates the story of Peyton's friend Adina. And the events of this book happen exactly at the same time as the events in Powerless. This is a book that you read in tandem with Powerless. Because if you read Powerless first, you're gonna have a huge, massive spoiler for this book. And this was my greatest mistake, because by the time that I finished Powerless, I had this huge spoiler. So I didn't feel like picking up this book because I felt, well, I already know everything that happens. And I left it in my shelf and I didn't even know if I would feel like picking it up. And it was only when I did my reread of Powerless and Reckless in preparation to Fearless that I said, okay, let's try the tandem read that it's recommended. And I did the tandem read of this book together with Powerless, and it was just so much better. It was just beautiful. This story was amazing. If I already liked Adina in the trilogy, after I read this book, everything was just so much better. All my emotions were a lot more intense after reading this book. I just cannot stress enough the fact that you need to read this in tandem at the same time as Powerless. And there is an official list, which is this one. And I will link it also from the official site on the description below. But again, you need to read this. Do not skip this book. It is very relevant and you need to read it in tandem. I know it sounds painful, but honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. This book is rather short, so you will find yourself reading perhaps one chapter from this book, 10 from Powerless, then switch back to one chapter here, another 5 from Powerless, then back here, etc. And this book happens pretty much, I would say, between 5% of the book and 90% of the book. That's where the events of this book take place, within Powerless. So you cannot read it before because this book wouldn't make any sense. The whole main story is in Powerless. And then you read this complementary to Powerless at the same time. And you can read it afterwards like I did, but then again, you have a massive, huge spoiler if you do that. So if you want to be completely surprised by everything, trust me, do the tandem read. Also, do not skip this book because there are a lot of references in this book that will be relevant later in the series, especially in Fearless. And there is another character in this book that is pretty relevant to the story, and it will take a pretty important role in Fearless. And you won't recognize him in Fearless, and you won't know his backstory, what he's capable of, and his motives if you do not read this book first. And again, aside from this being needed for the whole trilogy, it's a beautiful story. I love the story between these two characters, between Adina and the other character that appears in this book. And also, as a side note, this is such a beautiful story from a character that has quite a different personality to Peyton. Although Peyton and Adina's situation is quite similar in the way that they are both living under the same conditions and facing similar struggles, Adina has such a soft, beautiful, eternally optimistic type of personality. She's such a wonderful character. And you already see that in the main trilogy, but especially it shines here. And I found that the dedication in the beginning of this book is beautiful because it perfectly describes the character and the attitude of Adina, which is, to the girls with softer dreams, your purpose is just as powerful. Read it, trust me. Read it. And now I'm gonna read a couple of my favorite quotes, out of context, spoiler-free, from Powerless. If you don't want to hear them and go completely blindsided into Powerless, I completely get that. So you can skip to this point where I'm gonna be showing you the editions that I have because they are gorgeous. This is from Kai's point of view. Peyton asks him, "What is your favorite color?" I spin her, if only to give myself some time to think. I'd never thought about what my favorite color was before. It never seemed important. Not until I looked into a pair of ocean blue eyes and realized that perhaps drowning was a beautiful thing. Not until I looked into a pair of fiery blue eyes and realized that perhaps burning was a painless thing. Not until I looked into a pair of sky blue eyes and realized that perhaps falling was a peaceful thing. I'd never thought about what my favorite color was before because I hadn't seen one that was worthy of the title. Until now, that is. Blue, I say, my voice low. She's looking at me thoughtfully, studying me sincerely. I would have never guessed. Neither would I. And this is from Peyton's point of view. Your smile. I cut him off before his offer can tempt me. I like when you truly smile, when you're not wearing the mask of the future enforcer or the prince, and you simply allow me to see you. It's a smile I wish you would share with me more often. I swallow and fall silent. That was not at all what I intended to tell him, and yet, that doesn't make it any less true. At the sight of that smile, it's easy to forget who he is and what he does. At the sight of that smile, I see a boy instead of the king's deadly pawn. At the sight of that smile, I see someone who is more than a friend, instead of someone who would kill me if they knew what I am. And suddenly, that smile is sounding very dangerous. Even with my stupid dimples, you still like my smile? Kai's words are soft, slightly breathless, and my answer is equally so. Even with your stupid dimples, Azer. Here's your sample. I won't spoil anything else. This is the first edition that I bought before I knew that this was the American edition. Then I got reckless in the UK international edition, and then I had to buy the rest of the trilogy in that edition. First, because it's the one that's available where I live. Second, because I think it's a gorgeous edition. As you can see, they look quite different. So once I got the later editions, I had to get myself the UK Powerless edition so that all my books would match. So now I'm left with this random Powerless edition, but I'll keep it anyway. I love this book. And as you see, there's quite a difference between the two editions. The UK/International edition has a different font in the title compared to the American. They have also different sizes. And apart from that, the dust jacket in the International edition has some sort of glossy elements that are just beautiful. Also, if we look at the inside of these books, this is how the American edition looks like. So it has a small detail in the hardback, but it just doesn't compare to this beauty. This would be the side. And this is the back. Like how gorgeous this is. And also you can see that in the inside jackets of the UK/International edition, there are beautiful illustrations, and they serve also as a reversible jacket because you can turn this around and this could be the cover of the book. Whereas there's nothing in this US edition. You also find color maps in the end papers of the UK edition. This is how Reckless looks like. With the print of the reversible dust jacket. And it contains the Azer family tree. Here we have Fearless. The reversible dust jacket for Fearless with a new expanded map, and Powerful. Also with its reversible dust jacket. The end papers of Powerful. And here is the completed collection without the dust jackets. These editions are just gorgeous. And look at the quotes in the back. They are quotes from this book. Mark my words, Prince, I will be your undoing. You promised to be my undoing, so prove it. Forever my undoing. I will leave a mark on your heart. And the completed collection. So this was everything that I had to say for this video. I hope that you enjoyed this review. I hope that I could convince you, if you haven't read this yet, to take a chance on the Powerless Trilogy. And I really hope that if you start reading this series, that you enjoy this experience, because you only get one chance to read it for the first time, and that you fully immerse yourself into this world, and that you love the story and the characters as much as I did. Let me know in the comments if you're planning to read it, if you've read it, if you've liked it. Also, if you have recommendations for similar stories, make sure to drop those in the comments because I would love to read them. And thanks a lot for watching. I will see you in the next video.